Hello everybody, welcome back. Happy Memorial Day. So just stay safe during this time. It's still pretty rough out there. So today I'm going to be talking about the family tree of every single English monarch that we can consider as a king of England. So I'm going to start with Alfred the Great, and I'm going to finish up with our current queen, Elizabeth II. Since I don't have a chart back up here, so I'm going to be explaining this via computer, and you will be hearing my voice as I explain, and I'll give you the list. So here you go. So here is my list of every English monarch from Alfred the Great to Queen Elizabeth II. Now, Alfred the Great was not a king of England, but the king of Wessex. Back then, England was divided into smaller territories, and Wessex grew to dominate them all. Alfred was followed by his son, Edward the Elder, then to his son, Athelstan, who was the actual person to conquer England, so some people consider him to be the first king of England. The throne then passed to his brother, then to another brother, and then on to some nephews. But it still stayed within the family. We then come to a king called Alfred the Unready. During his time on the throne, England was frequently attacked by Vikings, and eventually the king and his family was forced to go into exile. And after a couple of Viking kings died and left, the throne returned to the original house. The last king of the original Anglo-Saxon kings was King Edward the Confessor. Edward didn't have any sons, and on his deathbed, he named his brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson, as king. This established a new house, the House of Godwin. But Edward had, through his mother, a cousin who was in Normandy that claimed that Edward had already promised him the throne. That person, William the Conqueror, was not at all happy, and he invaded England with his Norman army and defeated Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. This established a new royal house, the House of Normandy. Fun fact, William happened to be a descendant of Charlemagne, emperor/king of the Franks. So this means that everyone who can trace their descent to William can also mean that they are a descendant of Charlemagne. William the Conqueror was followed by his sons, William II and then Henry I. After Henry died, two people claimed the throne. One was Henry's daughter Matilda, and the other was Henry's nephew, Stephen. Stephen became king and established the House of Blois. But Stephen was eventually defeated by Matilda's son, Henry II. This established a new house, the House of Plantagenet. Henry was a descendant of both Alfred and William because if you follow Matilda's maternal line, you come to someone called Saint Margaret of Scotland, who was a granddaughter of Alfred the Unready. So every monarch from this point forward is a descendant of both Alfred and William. Henry was followed by his son, Richard the Lionheart, the famous Crusader king, and then by another son, John. It was during the reign of John that the Magna Carta was signed. The throne then went to his son, Henry III, then to his son, Edward I, then came Edward II and Edward III. Edward III had 4 children, and the throne went to his grandson, Richard II. But then Richard II was defeated by his cousin, Henry IV. We then get Henry V and Henry VI. The War of the Roses began during Henry VI's reign because one of his cousins claimed to be the eldest heir. That was Edward IV, and he was the eldest in a line that would allow female monarchs, while Henry was the eldest in a male-only line. After Edward, Henry gets it again, but then Edward retakes it. The throne then passes to his son, Edward V, but Edward V and his brother mysteriously disappeared, so the throne went to Edward IV's brother, Richard III. But he was defeated by Henry VII, who through his mother was a Lancastrian. So the Henrys were the Lancaster branch, while the Edwards and the Richard were the York branch. Henry married Edward IV's daughter, uniting the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. This established the House of Tudor. We then come to one of England's well-known kings, King Henry VIII. He was most famous for having 6 wives. The way to remember what happened to his wives is divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Henry wanted a son as his heir, so he married multiple times, and he was followed by his young son, Edward VI, but he died young, so the throne went to his eldest half-sister, Mary. Mary had no children, so her younger half-sister, Elizabeth, took the throne. She turned England into a Protestant country, but because she had no kids, the House of Tudor came to an end. The throne then passed to the House of Stuart in Scotland. That was because Henry VIII had a sister named Margaret, and her line became the line of succession. Elizabeth's cousin James VI and I became king. He was called this because he was James VI in Scotland, and he was James I in England. The throne then passed to his son, Charles I, but he wanted too much power and he was beheaded, and the Commonwealth of England took control for a decade, with most of it being ruled by a felon called Oliver Cromwell. But the monarchy was eventually restored with Charles' son, Charles II. The throne then went to his brother, James II and VII. The throne then went to James's daughter, Mary II, who had a joint reign with her husband, William III and II, who happens to be her very own cousin until Mary died. After William died in 1702, Mary's sister Anne took the throne. During her reign, England and Scotland merged to become Great Britain. But since Anne's son died before she did, with her, the House of Stuart came to an end. What happened next was that the throne jumped to Anne's second cousin living in Germany, who was the grandson of Charles I's sister, and that person became George I. The throne then went to his son, George II, and then on to his grandson, George III. During the reign of George III, Britain merged with Ireland to become the United Kingdom, but George III was mostly known for losing the American colonies. After him, the throne went to his son, George IV. The throne then went to his brother, William IV, and after that to the daughter of his younger brother, who became Queen Victoria. Victoria was one of the longest reigning monarchs in British history. She married Prince Albert from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in Germany, so this established a new house when her son, Edward VII, became king. The throne then went to his son, George V. He was king during World War I, and since Britain was fighting Germany, they changed the name of the house to a less German-sounding name, the House of Windsor. His son, Edward VIII, lasted less than a year since he wanted to marry an American, which was very unpopular, so he ended up abdicating. The throne went to his brother, George VI. He was succeeded by his daughter, the current queen, Elizabeth II. She is currently on her 68th year on the throne, longer than any monarch before her. She will likely be followed by her son, Charles, and he would become King Charles III. But he might choose to reign as George VII. After that, we would get a King William V and a King George VII or VIII. So, that was a look at every single monarch of Britain and England of the United Kingdom, from Alfred the Great to Queen Elizabeth II. So that is the end of my presentation of every single British monarch from Alfred the Great to Queen Elizabeth II. Once again, thank you so much for watching. This is going to be the end of the video, unfortunately. So please subscribe to my channel if you are new. And as always, I'd like to hear feedback from you if you want to. And see you next time.